My name is Seham Yateem. I am a young uh, Bahraini graduate, postgraduate, and I am currently an HR director. I have completed my master's degree with the Fulbright Scholarship in Community Development and Action, but I also have a bachelor's in interior design. And my interests are cultural relations and competency, utilizing arts within the realm of community and cultural development, and generally international um, understanding towards utilizing arts within connecting, let's say, cultures.
That's really wonderful, and we're very honored to have you here today.
It's an
And to
honor
talk.
to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, I'd like to get started with, how you got into that field and what made you passionate about it.
Well, that's an interesting question. I have always loved the arts in all of its
Mhm.
forms ever since I was a little kid. My mom
I
would
can see some
always,
art behind you.
yeah. Actually, these are art pieces that I've worked on alongside with my mom. My mom
Oh,
actually,
wow.
uh, my mom actually paints too, and my sister. It probably runs in the family. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so we she has always at least I was surrounded within a family that firmly believes to hone and sort of capitalize on our creative talents. So she would
Mm.
always get me those creative toys and art supplies and get me in these competitions of
Mm.
drawing and painting and stuff like that. So we were always sort of kept in a platform of utilizing our creativity and to producing art. Um, and over time, I also found the interest of all sorts of arts like installations, music, movies, books, and also dancing. Later on within life, I started learning the art of movement, basically,
Mhm.
and I teach it too. So it was a very interesting, basically, conception of I was born into the love of arts. And I wanted to study fine arts in my degree. But within a community, they would usually tell you that arts doesn't necessarily, in Bahraini, they say my akil khubz. So
Yeah.
you would go with something that's more conformed into the society of take a job that actually pays you something and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. But I was also my family were very much into not losing that talent. So I got the Ministry of Education scholarship into studying interior design, which was sort of a mix of, job career level of doing arts, basically.
Yeah.
And then within that period of time, I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities, a lot of them that had to do with um, community development projects. We've worked with SDGs,
Mhm.
the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, within those projects. And these aspects have also allowed me to deal with internationals. We had a lot of interns that we used to bring into Bahrain, and I found so much interest in, first of all, presenting the gem that Bahrain is, that we don't get to see even as locals being a part of it on a daily basis. And also the ambassadorship that comes with being that cultural face to people that have never experienced or heard about your culture before. And it takes so much, it takes just a simple step that does so much into creating cultural relations between people. And that has pushed me into realizing that I have such a passion towards community development, which is where I sort of directed my master's degree towards. And I was thankful to actually be part of a Fulbright scholarship, which is a cultural ambassadorship program also,
Right. Yeah.
because you're sort of representing the country abroad. Um,
Mhm.
and it was a wonderful experience to be able to stand and represent Bahrain whilst also studying something that would bring in that talent of uniting cultures in the essence of building communities at the same time, sort of bridging them. So yeah,
Right.
that's briefly it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And while we're on the topic, I have a question for you because I've actually watched some of your videos, and I've come across one in which you talked about cultural diversity, and you said that it would not, and I think it had to do with internships as well. And you said that it would not only break stereotypes, but it would also introduce a cross-cultural understanding. Could you talk about why that is important and really just fill us in everything you know about it? Of course, not everything, but you get the point about, about it based on your experiences.
About internships, just to get the, could you repeat the question again?
Yes, no problem. So I would
Yeah.
like you to talk about, the importance of cross-cultural understanding and,
Okay.
what you know about it, basically.
Okay. So one thing is that we live in a world that's very much globalized at this point.
Mhm.
You can find bits and pieces of every culture in every sort of environment that you're a part of. You could be in Bahrain and have
Mhm.
an entire culture that is completely, let's say, Serbian, let's say.
Mhm.
Or you could be, at one point of the world and have a culture that is completely different, because not only do people migrate, but we also have a sharing of resources, a sharing of cultural artifacts, and a sharing of many other things that create the sort of globalized world that we live in. So it's very hard to just be cocooned within the bubble of only your culture, because you would at any
Mhm.
point of time get to experience or interact with another culture. Plus, a lot of cultures are based on the amalgamation of many cultures, basically. Um, but when it comes to cross-cultural understanding, I think it's more towards being able to have this um, persona, or the sort of character that comes with respect, that comes with
Mhm.
comprehension and empathy, and some sort of emotional intelligence towards being able to understand differences and accept them. And even within that, to look into the similarities, basically, that you would also find within cultures. So we can't expect that all cultures are to be exactly the same. And there's so
Mhm.
much beauty that comes with differences within cultures. That's what makes each culture unique within itself, basically. And to have this sort of understanding is element of empathy. It's also an element um, of emotional intelligence. And it's an element towards creating this harmonious unity that would allow people to coexist within a certain space, to accept differences and embrace similarities within that too.
Okay. And I think that actually answers my second question I have for you. But if you would like to add anything else, you can go ahead. And yeah, so my second question for you is, do you think there is anything we as a people can do to avoid as much as possible stereotypical incidences, if you think they still happen, and enable us to grow into a more loving and welcoming community?
That's a very good question, actually, because one thing that I realized out of my experience of working with a lot of internationals or even traveling abroad, is that we would always stereotype. Even the people that assume that they don't, we would do it whether directly or indirectly. And it's sort of human nature, that we have this sort of preference, or I wouldn't say segregation, but that you would label things as a human, just to sort of create the sort of folder aspect of understanding characteristics and therefore putting it or boxing it under a label and therefore stereotyping it. Basically, it helps, it sort of assists us in understanding our surroundings. So there isn't anything to necessarily blame in terms of when stereotyping, but the culture that one grows in, or even the platform or environment that one grows in, makes a big difference on how that stereotypes come to play. It basically starts off with the slightest of being able to understand that the one thing that is pointed about when stereotyping someone would not necessarily be something bad, and therefore the person wouldn't take it as an insult per se, but you would understand that they're not necessarily known for that, and therefore you would approach it in a manner of, these people are morally considered, like I would take an example of, I would take an example of myself because I wouldn't want to sort of
Okay.
do any sort of stereotype on anyone.
Yeah.
But for example, in Bahrain, we see it a lot that people that are Bahrainis, yet speak English most of the time, are considered chicken nuggets, which I was stereotyped as a kid a lot. And we have recently seen in, I believe, one of the news in Bahrain, they have had this sort of um, talk with the community in regards to, what do you think about chicken nuggets and all of that, and is it causing a havoc to our culture? Are we losing our culture in the midst of all of that? Now, taking it from another perspective, is that why aren't we understanding, how are we embracing the concept of this difference that's happening? So stereotypes also happen because of differences from one's culture, and then they would be sort of labeled as that. So embracing the positive elements that come within that allows us to sort of understand that we can't judge people by external factors or by the general public's opinion towards that, but rather understand it based on experiences, and your experience alone does not determine the entire population's
Right.
character, basically. So we wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it's easy to label, for example, kids that talk English, but they are born from Arab descendants, as chicken nuggets. But that just allows people to understand what they're talking about. As in, when I say, oh, this chicken nugget, I wouldn't have to say, oh, this Arabic person that speaks English a lot. It's shorter. But there's also a negative connotation that comes with stereotypes. So it's more about, I would say, an embrace towards understanding between people, and to sort of, we base it off as a joke, and as within the region, we are known for creating humor out of a lot of, or anything, and that's why memes exist in this day and age. But these jokes also have this sort of hidden, touch of truth to some people that we forget. And I think it's about understanding or keeping in mind that there are people that exist out there, that would be affected by it. And this understanding that comes with empathy that would sort of surpass the concept of stereotypes.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer.
Thank you.
So, and moving on, I'd like to ask you next about, one of your experiences that I come to know. So you worked as the Youth Engagement Operations Manager at the Oasis Center, I believe. Is that true? Okay.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Do you want to say about, what your role was and how you've kind of engaged with the youth?
Sure. So that was an experience that I had when I was completing my master's at the city that I was at. The beautiful thing about the Oasis Center is that they were primarily targeting youth from all segments within society.
Mm-hmm.
So they dealt a lot with at-risk youth primarily. And at-risk youths are basically the youth that are more prone um, into let's say criminal environments, either because their families have sort of been within problematic situations, or they live in neighborhoods that are not necessarily safe. Um, and they basically create these sort of sessions and platforms and also experiences that allow these kids to become part of the community in ways that are helpful towards them. And at-risk youth are also kids that have been to jail, for example, or have experienced
Mm-hmm.
traumatic situations. And these sort of platforms allow them to be part of the community and realize that they are contributors to the society that they're in. So, as a youth engagement officer, I had the responsibility in towards assessing and executing the programs that we had for the
Mm-hmm.
youth at that time. We had sessions that um, had the youth work on creating bicycles, scooters, and all those sort of transportation um, items
Right.
for uh, the poor within their area. And they would basically learn the techniques towards the mechanic of using those things and actually be able to create and make something out of it. We also had a program that basically focused on these youths creating art pieces and artworks that were presented out to the community that we were in.
Mm-hmm.
And they created exhibitions for them. And another project was that we were given a mural, um, like basically a long wall area within the city, where these youths were able to sort of put their art on these walls. And it was to present basically youth development for the city, or positive youth development towards the city. It's a great program. It utilizes the talents of these youth and engages them in positive spaces to um, create a safe learning environment for these kids that they may have not, gotten chance to experience for free.
Right. I think that's you've done a wonderful thing being a part of that organization, and I think the whole point of it is also pretty helpful to those children that have may have gone through a traumatic experience per se, and you've given them kind of a chance to believe in themselves and believe that they still can do good and still have good within them and their community. So yeah, and you've interacted with youth, if I'm not wrong, globally, and you're also pretty young yourself. What would you say is the biggest problem for us today?
As youth, you mean? Or in the world?
Youth, I mean, in general. Or you could talk
That's
about
a
some of your
very
problems you're facing personally as well.
that's a very critical question, I would say, because I know that a lot of research has been done, and a lot of statistics are
Mhm.
actually out there that describe the challenges that youth currently face. And I know recently there was a statistic that was published in regards to the issues that Arab youth have mentioned to face mostly. And I know that a lot of it was based on traumatic experiences that they've had from, let's say, the experiences that they have basically within their countries. And I know that a lot of youth are basically, if you would ask, a lot of the youth of today would consider that climate change is one of the toughest um,
Mhm.
issues that we currently have. Inclusion and equality, they would also say, is one of the toughest. If I were to speak based on my experience and current position of work, I would say that one thing that the youth struggle with the most is being able to find the right fit of a job, or create the right fit of a job towards what they are talented in. And that's why you find the levels of unemployment within youth to be challenging, not only within
Mhm.
Bahrain or the region, but generally around the world. Yet, the youth are one of the most diligent and the most dynamic in trying
Mhm.
to um, find these opportunities, and even break through barriers that would necessarily be there. They create their own opportunities, but I feel like the platforms that are available to sort of cater to the diversity of talents that are out there is it could be missing. It could also not necessarily be right there, or it would need tweaking, I would say. So, in my opinion, this is just one of the many uh, issues that youth would might be facing at this moment of time. So, yeah.
Right. And, going over the last point you had about, the challenges youth is facing, I think one of our key goals at Youth Wave MENA is to really help youth all over across MENA, I mean, kind of identify what they want to do. And even if they are not able to do that, at least have the experience or try out things that, they want to try. And we think it's only a good thing, to have them have a fair chance at what they want to do. And then maybe if they come up to a realization later that it's not the right thing, at least they tried. And I think that also comes into play when you hear a lot of successful people, say, well, we never knew unless we tried. We've
True.
made a lot of failures, we've gone through these many things, but we've reached here. And if platforms, especially youth organizations, if we can kind of allow them to feel safe, feel happy about it, feel okay to make mistakes, feel okay to have the experience, not pressure them while they're having this, adventure, that can give us a more positive outcome. That is what I believe.
I definitely agree with that. I believe that the chance it we
Mhm.
miss the chances that we don't take, and those are essentially points of growth that could happen within
Mhm.
experiences that we may have not known of unless we actually tried.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, so this is something you've also mentioned to me that you would like to talk about, and it was on quality education. What do you have to say about, what are your views on quality education, and what do you have to say about the present compared to the past, and how do you see the future of education?
That's a very good question. So I would base it off on Bahrain as a start, and then grow forward with it, because I have experienced it hands-on, and then look into what could come along. We have come a distance, I would say, in terms of the way we approach education. A lot of the schools are embracing the smart education, and you'd find a lot of tech utilized, and especially nowadays, everything's sort of moved digitally. So we are embracing it pace by pace. But now, if we look into more of a academic context, we still have, I would say, a lot to go forward with, only because, for example, we do have a handful of universities in Bahrain, and a lot of them are very well based. Yet we have the same degrees available in all these universities. There isn't a variety of degrees available within this sort of space. And then a lot of these kids or students that would want to have more creative degrees would end up traveling abroad to be able to get these opportunities. And then when they get to realize that the external countries embrace these talents or these creative learnings that they would want to sort of take forward, they would end up staying in these external, abroad. And then we end up saying, why don't we have, people who are creative enough to sort of start something that is out of this world, like, I don't know, someone who studied rocket science, and we have a Bahraini rocket scientist, for example. But we don't have that platform of at least starting to learn it, to open up opportunities within it. So how would we go forward with that, for example? And that's something that I feel like, for example, vocational advising is not a prominent thing here. And even if it was, it's not done in a manner that sort of embraces all talents and goes forward with it. It's more of a very conformed aspect of, oh, go end up studying business or, engineering, which is not to say anything bad of it. Not to say it's also a generic degree, but there is a lot of talent within every single person. And they could be utilizing their talents into platforms or studies or jobs that are much more creative than, just the typical marketeer, for example. And they can do a lot more with it. So I feel like there are, of course, a lot of these initiatives like Mashru'i or Injaz or things like that that push for creativity, but I feel like being able to learn and study adds a lot more basically to it than just having, for example, a project that they do and all of that. So that's what I look into when it comes to quality education. It's the approach towards educating oneself and having the platform to be able to hone every single kind of talent out there, rather than standardizing everything and banning creative concepts, let's say.
Right, that's an excellent point you made there. So unfortunately, we have to end this interview real soon, but I really
Yep.
enjoyed it. And you're an amazing speaker, and you've mentioned so many
Thank
great
you.
things that our audience can, learn from and be inspired.
You're a wonderful human being yourself.
Thank you so much. So I think the last question I'd have for you is, what is your advice for youth?
Wow, that feels like a very, very big responsibility. um, one thing that I would definitely say, if I had to just say one thing, is don't ever let anyone don't ever let anyone hinder or um put out that spark or that sparkle
Mhm.
within you. And always strive for what you're passionate for. You will always find something good out of it, as long as it's good. Um, but I would definitely say that whatever it is that you're talented in, you can definitely make something out of it. And you can definitely basically go forward with um, creating a masterpiece, not to necessarily say art, but to create something amazing that comes with it that would not only benefit yourself, but it will benefit the whole community and one day maybe the world. It's just that those opportunities or those talents that we don't tap into within us and sort of end up conforming to society for are huge missed opportunities that could end up being something amazing one day. So I would definitely say strive towards what you're passionate for, and don't let go of what you're talented in.
Thank you so much. I think that was a beautiful thing we've ended this conversation with, and I hope
Thank you.
the youth out there that will be listening to this will, to take that advice very seriously and, believe in themselves more and their what they're passionate about. Thank you so much, Mr. Home, and I hope you've had a wonderful time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Umaima, for having this. And I really hope that there a lot of um, youth platforms basically grow out of this. And I would definitely like to thank the Manama Hub to have allowed me to get this opportunity. The Global Shapers is a great platform also for youth, and we have the honor of collaborating with you in this.
Definitely. So thank you so much, and
Thank
I hope
you.
we can stay in touch later as well.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too.